When one explores, they are interacting with the game world in hopes of achieving a multitude of things, among them being, but certainly not limited to, simply to find what they believe is the path of progression, whether it is a narrative progression or spatial progression in the level, being rewarded through thorough exploration and investigation, either in the form of in-game weapons, upgrades, currency, or lore, and lastly, simply to pique one's curiosity when they are given multiple paths to follow or a choice on where to go. Many games, especially adventure games, are built with exploration in mind, explicitly placing Easter eggs and rewards in places off the beaten path for players to find, and having extra space in the game world that serves extra purpose outside of the mainline progression. Along with exploration, there is time. Every game handles time. Time plays a big part of the in-game experience, ranging from depleting bars to manage like hunger bars, restricted playtime and timers, day-night cycles, and some games even having the ability to manipulate time yourself, such as slowing down time in Superhot or bullet time in Breath of the Wild. Time in games can be distinguished between playtime and event time, where event time is the simulated time that is passing in the game world, and playtime being the real world seconds, minutes, or hours spent playing a game. In most online and local multiplayer PvP games, there tends to be a timer to denote the end of matches or rounds, as to limit playtime if an unequal outcome does not arise in a timely manner. These timers are both playtime and event time, ticking down real-time seconds before the in-game matches end. These two concepts of exploration and time combine to synergize into the core of most game experiences, called a game loop. Exploration requires time. It takes time to traverse a game world, and in some cases, time is just not what the game offers and what players have. Time is limited in one way or another, and repeatedly diving back into a game constitutes a game's core play loop. One pretty obvious example of this can be seen in a game called Outer Wilds. In Outer Wilds, the player is trapped in a time loop. In each loop, the player only has 22 minutes, simultaneously event time and play time, to go to whatever destination they choose, explore what that location offers, read whatever text the player may find, all before the sun explodes and cuts them off dead in their tracks. There is nothing the player can do to halt that timer outside of a few quality of life settings that Outer Wilds offers. Even the environment itself changes throughout the 22 minutes, further limiting what areas and information the player can access at any given time throughout the loop. Time becomes a resource to be managed in this context, and it directly inhibits the player's ability to explore. Each play session is limited to approximately 22 minutes before the sun explodes, unless it is cut short by another unfortunate event, such as autopilot not taking into account that the sun is between you and your destination. Because the narrative and progression of Outer Wilds is non-linear, the player is not limited to a single avenue of navigation, so they can easily fly back over to where they left off in the last loop and continue as normal. While Outer Wilds is truly open world, game progress is made solely through narrative progress via what the player uncovers and learns through their exploration, as opposed to level and world progress, and this can be shown and tracked via your ship logs. However, two things that impede that progress is the environment the player must explore and the steady march of time, making every second spent at any given location all the more valuable. Time acts as the main obstacle impeding the player's progress, while also simultaneously being that which opens more avenues for the player to explore. In Dark Souls 3, however, exploration is not inhibited by time. Yet the concept of the play loop is still very much valid, as one can find themselves performing the same actions and repeating the same scenarios each time their player avatar dies and respawns at the last bonfire. While in Outer Wilds, you respawn back at the same exact spot each loop, coincidentally also a bonfire, the player may start from any number of bonfires in Dark Souls, instantiating a loop from different points based off game progression. When players have to make a run from one bonfire to the next boss, that is called a boss run, which is a loop most players would go through more than others when dying to a boss multiple times and returning to the closest bonfire, which is only subverted when the player defeats said boss and is able to progress further. While Dark Souls 3 doesn't have any internal event times outside of things such as AI pathing, scripted and triggered events, and status effects, playtime is still a tracked metric in the game that can be used to generally calculate your progress based on how long you've been playing for. Standing around and doing nothing will not progress the game in Dark Souls. The player will not be attacked, day won't turn to night. There is nothing in the game that happens without the player's implicit action and triggering of events. However, in Outer Wilds, the world and the environment is ever changing and ever moving along with time, all without the player's input or interaction. In both games, there are avenues for bypassing sections of their loops, shortcuts, discovered through further exploration. The main difference between the two is between spatial and narrative shortcuts. One utilized only via unlocking the shortcut in space, and the other via learning about its inherent existence. In Dark Souls, you can subvert whole sections of a loop by unlocking a gate that allows travel in both directions, while in Outer Wilds, the environment is all the same each loop, so the only thing stopping a player from utilizing a certain shortcut or path is their knowledge of it from learning about it via text or discovering it via exploration. These shortcuts allow the player to do more within their respective loops, from exploring more before the sun explodes to bypassing a particular annoying bunch of enemies to bring you closer to the next bonfire. By exploring the environments in these games, the player learns how the game works through repetition and trial and error, using these loops to discover successful strategies to traverse the environment and mastering the mechanics provided by the game to progress. Unlike arcade games and PvP multiplayer games that have multiple separated play sessions needed to master mechanics of the game, these loops in Souls-likes and Outer Wilds are confined wholly within the individual play sessions.